Awesome. Welcome everyone to round 6 of Australs. Unless anyone has any questions, we'll get underway. I'd like to welcome up the first speaker of the affirming team to open the debate.
Hi, am I audible, panel? All right, it's just a disclaimer. Oh, I cannot open my camera because the device I'm using does not have a webcam. Apologies. Panel, I'd like to ask 15 seconds to set up my equipment. Thank you. Sorry for the delay. All right, panel, beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. Now, when talking about the World Cup, right, people mostly focus about football, but the essence of football itself is unity. Therefore, people want to be inclusive. People want to watch football, enjoy the sport, watch it at the stadium, regardless of your principles in life, whether it be you're gay, heterosexual, cis, trans, right? No matter what your personality in life is, if insofar as you enjoy football, you should be able to enjoy it towards the extent where everyone else enjoys it, regardless of who hosts it, who plays, where they play, and why they play in the first place. Panel. 3 parts of my speech for today. Firstly, is the framing, secondly, substantives, and thirdly, moving on to the comparatives on why we win over side negative. Framing several pieces, but mainly just 3. Firstly, One Love. What is the One Love symbol? It is a symbol for the LGBTQIA rights movement in Qatar specifically. Captains are to wear it to show their support. It isn't inherently harmful to the game. We'll explain further in our substantive, and we argue too that captains should be focused on the game the most. Whatever the repercussions outside of the game, be it PR, is secondary because they are at fundamentally, they are football players. They should score goals. That should be the main focus of their career. Second piece of framing is that this is an act of motion. Therein, what are the incentives of the actors involved? Firstly, FIFA. FIFA, they do not want everyone to do this. FIFA, they do not want everyone else to do this. So that is why they have this general guideline, right? They want to overcome the suppression. They want to suppress this to some extent. But to overcome the suppression, to some extent, resistance needs to be shown. FIFA will most likely only give a yellow card, right? It's unlikely for them to give red because FIFA wants a fair game, and an unfair game would be damaging for their profits. People won't want to watch an unfair game. They will complain. They will critique FIFA. They will boycott it to some extent. People will not want to watch it by escape. FIFA also has a few principles that they stand by, prehistorically speaking. Because in the past, in the Premier League, captains wear black armbands to support Black Lives Matter. FIFA proves that somewhat stand by the equality. This then proves to you that FIFA is also inclusive to some extent, and we argue to why FIFA cannot also be inclusive in this aspect, right? Therein, Bale's decision won't inherently be against FIFA's upstanding principles as an organization, right? Now, what is Bale's incentive in this? He has insane reputation. He's a famous figure in the football world. Therefore, he has a lot of people backing him. He has a big following, a big support structure, right? But he used to play for Real Madrid, Tottenham Hotspur. Hell, he even won a Champions League 5 times, that being the highest achievement for football clubs in the European Union or even the general West, right, panel? What then is the incentive for Wales as a nation? The chief executive of Football Association of Wales says that they're willing to take the yellow card, they're willing to take the fine, so long as their stance towards the LGBTQIA rights stands, right, panel? They want to stand by their principles because that is what they believe in as a nation. That is their identity. Therein, the players are justified and in fact held accountable to respect their nation's stance. To some extent, I'll explain further in my own substantive, right, panel? Well, why is that okay to some extent Bale to do this? Because Bale won't even catch much flack to begin with because there are others that do this in the same light. The others are mainly the ones that I can mention off the top of my head is Virgil van Dijk, captain of Denmark, Manuel Neuer, captain of Germany, Harry Kane, also made the same decision to do so. The burden is for them to prove to you today. Side affirmative only has to prove to you why it is within Bale's best interest as the captain of Wales, as the individual, as the Wales captain to then do this to wear the One Love armband. So my substantive to you then are twofold. One main substantive, one secondary substantive. My main substantive is that the principal arguments of the debate for today. 3 prongs in whole. First prong, the representation of the organizations, because the organizations are the ones that fund the players' logistics, fund their salary, fund their PR image, fund them being able to play, fund their jerseys and whatnot, right? Things that really matter for a football player to be identified as a football player. Even if you're getting a yellow card, we argue to you the comparative is worse because if you do not adhere to your organizer's stances, what they stand by, you're most likely gonna get benched. Therefore, you cannot play. And not playing in the World Cup when you're actually in the roster itself. Hell, even if you're the team's captain in the starting lineup, like someone with Bale being in that position, that is very detrimental. That is very detrimental to your career as a whole, regardless of what part of the career you're in, what phase of your football life you're in at that specific moment in time. Especially since Bale, we say it's okay for Bale specifically to do this because Bale is phasing out of the football world. He's old, he's retiring. Therein, the repercussions in the football world won't affect him that much because his time is about to come to an end anyway, right? He's gonna retire, might as well he just goes for one last hurrah. It's better for him to stand for these principles rather than to adhere to the stringent regulations that these football worlds have. It won't affect that much. He's gonna retire anyway, right? He can retire at least peacefully, being remembered as a player that stood up for rights. It is unlikely for him to be given harsh repercussions due to A, his following, and B, just his position in the world of football itself. He's a very big figure. If you go against a big figure, there'll be scrutiny under the FIFA organization, right? In the event that he does get a red card, the match will instantly be an unfair game that is bad for FIFA because it is against the intentions. The impact would then be people will shit on Qatar as a nation, FIFA as an organization, because FIFA promised to be the prominent authority of football, but then again, they would allow an unfair game to be played in the World Cup platform nonetheless. What is then the second prong to the principle? Why does Bale specifically want to do this? He has already historically fought for similar movements like Black Lives Matter. He has worn the black armband, and on top of that, he has also openly condemned countries that do not respect this in the media, right? He's open about his support towards social movements of the likes, whether it be LGBTQ, IA, or Black Lives Matter. He has already said publicly that he wants to shed light on this issue specifically in the Qatar World Cup. If he backs off now, fans and the LGBTQIA community will label him as being principled inconsistent. The impact then will be that he will lose out on the fans that he garnered from championing these principles in the first place. Why then the final prong, the principle of why Wales as a nation and as a team would be okay with doing this? Because Wales is inherently part of Great Britain, who has historically been the champions of inclusivity, having a 100% in the inclusivity index. It will be in line with the national image. Therefore, we argue to you the people of Great Britain, the people of Great Britain wouldn't be that much inflamed by the fact that they wear the one love armband to protest the regulations, right? To protest the suppression of rights in Qatar. Now, moving on to my second substantive, the practicality behind all of this, right? It's just simply a secondary. My second is maybe further on the intricacies behind it. Why FIFA came up with the ban, right? Because Qatar is the hosting nation of the 2022 World Cup. Therefore, to be somewhat in line with Qatar's principles, FIFA decided to support, to at least be in the same idea or the same leniency as being like not allowing a public displays of affection for gay people, or to the extent of which the gay rights is also included in the narrative, because FIFA didn't really specify or to what extent they support Qatar's idea. They just said, hey, do not protest against Qatar's principles, Qatar's fundamentals, because that's bad to the host. When ironically, Qatar has championed the message that everyone is welcome. So Bale doing this wouldn't actually be against the principles of the host nation. Hell, if you are to say that Bale is doing this, it will be disrespectful for Qatar, then why the hell did Qatar be the one that explained to everyone that, hey, you're welcome, we just tell you to respect our principles, we respect your principles, right? Where do you draw the line? That is the burden that we have to push on side negative to then provide to us today. What is the comparative force panel? Firstly, we told you what is the inherent incentive for Bale as an individual and as a team captain to follow through with his decision to support the one love armband wearing. Secondly, we also talked to you about how Wales as a nation and as part of Great Britain as a whole would then be in line, and would even take it a step further insofar as their senior chief executive of Football Association saying that they're openly willing to take the fine, willing to take the red, willing to go through all the repercussions just so they can stand by the rights of the nationalistic idea towards the LGBTQIA community. Therefore, we also tell you that finally, in respects to FIFA and Qatar, it is not directly against the principle. It is somewhat tolerable to the extent of which they show respect. Hell, it's just wearing an armband. It's not like they're gonna kick the referee in the balls, right, panel? Vote for side affirmative. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that speech. Now to open the case for the negating team, I'd like to welcome up the first negating speaker.
Hi, before I begin, is it okay for people in this room that I have my camera open? All right. I'm assuming I'm also audible. All right. Okay. Sorry, my hands are very sweaty. Okay. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. A captain's role is to carry their team to finals. What you think and what you believe outside the field should, if possible, not interfere in that goal. The moment affirmative conceded that personal matters are indeed secondary, they already play on our field. A few rebuttals then isolated out before I proceed with the rest of my speech, right? The entire first affirmative came on to give us like examples of why FIFA is so inclusive, how they fought for Black lives, for example. Note that they could have been inclusive on previous matters such as those, but they aren't right now in this current context. So we have to fight, or we have to play around that specificality and not just have to think about the trend that already happened if it's different now, right? They say that the entire burden rested on the idea that, oh, what's the purpose, or what's the benefit, or what does whale stand for? But mind you, the motion already implied that this is an actor's motion, that we're all going to circle back to, for example, the shoes of the captain. This is the very nuance from this motion. And all discussions should tie back on what you stand for as a captain and what interests do you have to fight for and what you prioritize, right? But the motion was probably, and this was believes that the arguments will probably fly. You have to understand that, again, because it's in the shoes of the captain, we have to focus on that. Let's then proceed then. What the framings are going to look like, right? And now a few characterizations then of the actors and the people that you have to understand in this motion. Let's talk about then who you are as a team captain of a team, right? What you're gonna probably think. One, as a team captain, you're the leader, and the most you're probably the representation of that team. That looks like, because you are the leader, all your actions are likely to be emulated by your teammates. Even if not, because you are the representation, all consequences that you might have, especially in this case where FIFA did issue a consequence, they're also going to suffer from your actions. This is why exactly there's a difference in willingness to wear like the ban and the willingness to suffer the consequences, especially if it accounts an entire team that relies on you, right? Let's talk about then that the captain has to weigh two interests that he has in mind. One, his interest as a person or as an ally, where the making of the public statement is a testament of their belief, meaning that they would probably want to find a way where they can better exercise and better emphasize that they are an ally and that they support this ideology. And two, obviously his team, to ensure that they get to the farthest point of the competition and to make sure that all of their efforts are not wasted. A situation comes here, and why necessarily you have to think about, right? Let's talk about how the captain was not aware of the consequences after making making his announcement. It's going to be important when we're talking about how it's going to mitigate all of the harms that affirmative had posited, right? Consequences that come here are not just, for example, you being benched. It looks like you not being able to play. Everyone's sources and all of the time that they spend trying to fight or trying to prepare for this sport is all going to be wasted because they now can't play because of whatever bigoted decision FIFA made. This all the more points as to what necessarily we have to do. What's the burden of negative, right? In order to win this round, you have two burdens. One is to tell you what obligation and interest takes a higher seat when you're talking about being the captain. And two, if for example we have to bite the bullet of affirmative, that support is the main concern here, where we can even better exercise that doesn't have to jeopardize, it isn't at the cost of everything, right? In order to answer those burdens arguments then, first, why do we have a higher obligation to your team, right? What's the premise here? You have to understand that sport itself is a meritocratic event, or the reason that you don't proceed is mostly based on skill. If you do not proceed because of political and social justice reasons, you'll jeopardize all the efforts and careers of the people who trusted you as team captain. What's the analysis, right? Government might say that you promised the world to show support, but the promise you made with the team takes a higher precedence. Why so? Two things. One, they're in a more closer proximity. These are the people that you spend hours and hours trying to understand how the sport works and how you're going to get a better strategy and trying to fight against an opponent, right? And there's the people who trusted you necessarily. That's why you're even team captain in the first place. And second then is tangible consequences. The harm that you get for taking back the decision under affirmative is only simply disappointment. You're going to only feel the disappointment coming from the movement, like, oh, they didn't get to do this, that's sad. But the harm that you get for keeping it is so much more tangible, because then again, as I've mentioned earlier, you're probably likely not going to be allowed to play by FIFA, and then you're probably going to be taken out of the sport then. Why is that necessarily a bad thing, right? It looks like you waste investments made on your team and made by you and the team. Even if the consequences are minimal, like what affirmative said, the point stands, you already wasted everything. And considering the fact that the interest already takes higher precedence for you as a captain, where your entire goal at the end of the day is to proceed to the farthest point you can ever go to, and obviously it's going to look like that the team's interest is going to likely be more important to you. Consider that you are the representation, you are the leader. What's the second coming in then? You have to understand, right? If if the concern of the entire both houses then is going to be, how are we going to ensure support? Because the entire affirmative told you like, oh, we already made the statement, we might as well go push for it, because that's the main point of the FIFA, is to have unity on whatnot, right? Understand that there's probably another way that you can probably do it without having to sacrifice everything that has been made, everything that you had to do by this point. Because you have to understand that the consequences that were announced just hours before your game, meaning it's all the more crucial for you to understand what's at stake. How does it look like, right? Understand that it was not made in a the decision was made in an uninformed way. Because again, the decision or like the consequences were only made in fact just hours before your game. This looks like, for example, you didn't understand what was at stake. You probably never understood what the consequences you're going to have to bear. Not just you, but the entire team and the entire name that you're holding. That point, in fact, will probably look like you have it already answers the question on why it's reasonable for you to even take back your decision. It's never more a point of like if it's Wales, for example, because it also points in the info side that all teams, because of the announcement, already rescinded their decision because again they understood the consequences. So why should you be like what? Why exactly then are you the point or the point person that's probably going to change everything? It's going to lead to FIFA probably changing their decision on the one love ban, right? At this point, you already understand that even if you do wear, you will not amount to the benefit that you expect. I already pointed this out earlier. To extend more, you have to understand the global clamor already exists. People are probably entire globe already is criticizing the decision that FIFA already made. So at that point in time that you having to go against and having to sacrifice everything, it's probably not going to work anymore. It's probably not going to have a more substantial credit, right? The global understand that the responsibility and blame will not be on the captain for receiving their decision, but it will be on the FIFA for even having a consequences to something like this, right? I know that the people will probably understand what the consequences were and why you as a captain will probably prioritize yourself and your team, right? This was like then all of the harms that affirmative had already posited probably is already mitigated or probably is not as harmful as it probably said. What's the other alternatives that they talked about? Considering that this is context specific and government and affirmative already failed to prove to you why it had to be in the sport, why it had to be in during your game that you have to push your support, right? This is like we can also employ that you can also have show support before even afterwards your game where you're already able to, for example, reach the goal that you wanted as a team, right? It looks like you can call them out. You can call out FIFA for the decision that they made outside the game. Most people are probably going to show other supports or avenues like donations or whatnot. These are all perfect avenues that you can do it without the risk of it, right? So all the more we have to understand why it's more important to think about the captain in this round. Oppose.
Awesome, thank you very much for that speech. To continue the case for the affirming team, I'd like to welcome up the second affirming speaker.
Hi, I'm just making sure if it's good or not. Starting my speech. 3, It is true that the captain holds huge amount of responsibility towards the country, but you need to note there is no player bigger than a country, no player bigger than a club. One player alone cannot make a whole team to wait travel towards the World Cup. There are 11 players within your team and their benches. That is the reason if you choose not to represent the value your football association wants, they can easily replace you. Wales has a star bench with Daniel James, Aaron Ramsey, Neco Williams. These people can easily get promoted from vice captain to captain role, and they will continue to carry the duty in your place. Therefore, it is very easy for your country to replace you as a person. There is no burden or there's no reason for the country to hold on to you just because you choose not to do. What is it important for you to represent what your country wants? Harith told you clearly in his speech earlier. When you're representing Wales, you are playing football under the Wales Football Association. Now the question is, who actually choose Gareth Bale as the captain or the representing player for Wales? It is the manager and chief executive. The chief executive of Wales Football Association says he must wear the band. If you are the captain, because the association chooses you to represent them, you're also carrying their principle. As a captain, when you refuse to carry the principle of the main purpose, them choosing you to represent them, the team and the football association is going to repress you. Let's forget about the World Cup. Let's forget about even if you get a red card, you can be dropped from the team when you chose not to represent them in the first instance. The outcome here and the metric is very simple, Panel. If you represent the country, you don't wear, maybe you would get a yellow card, but still you'd continue to play for the national team. Even if you get a red card at the worst possible instance, you get banned for 3 games. The fourth game, you're again available to play. But in our world, when you choose not to represent what your football association wants, they can remove you from the national player as a whole. This jeopardizes your opportunity as a player to represent in upcoming features, because the Wales Association is who elects the player and chooses who to play. Why is it important for you to play in World Cup as a whole? Gareth Bale, as a retiring player, it is very hard for you to demand good wages for your future clubs. When you perform well in World Cup, it increases your market value as a player. It gives you a better ability to demand for better wages in other company to ensure you have a smooth retirement. But how are you going to even get a chance to play in the World Cup when your football association doesn't want you to play for the country because you refuse to be aligned with the principle they want you to do? The second response is then they tell to us, you know what, we can better emphasize on other way. We can ally these things in other way. Question is simple. What is the other way? Why is the other way somewhat equally effective? Because World Cup has 5 billion viewerships compared to any other sport. Even the World Super Bowl only has 1 billion EU. How are you going to get 5 billion viewership in other places, other instances, when we prove to you this is the largest metric of you getting exposure to people? The court of public opinion is largest when the World Cup is happening. Because in the past, even people who did not know who is Gareth Bale is now going to know you because of World Cup. This is a platform of performance where he could solidify his stand and prove he's being consistent with his principle. My first positive material then, as an actor, why Gareth Bale's personal revenue from being an ambassador for companies who support LGBTQ is important. Note, like what Harith told you, Gareth Bale is a 5-time Champions League winner. It is the prime and highest level club achievement a player could got. He is in sponsorship or ambassador for Adidas, Konami, BT Sport, Duracell, EA Sport, where he receives substantial revenue in hundreds of millions being an ambassador for this corporation. When Gareth Bale fails to stand by LGBTQ by not wearing the One Love band, corporations are going to likely pull out, because as an ambassador, you are expected to be aligned with the principles of the corporation that want you. No corporations will want to have Gareth Bale as an ambassador who openly goes against their principle, which they want him to be aligned with. Why is this revenue then important to Gareth Bale as an actor? He is 34 years old, nearing the end of his career. He's playing in an outcast league, MLS, and his only income to survive is in his football wages. The moment he retires from football, not playing, the only income he's receiving then is from corporations who make him an ambassador to promote their product. The moment he's again all this, the moment he pulls out from not wearing the one armband, all the corporations who made him an ambassador would pull him out for violation of contract, which is against the principle of these corporations have been supporting all this while. Because no corporation in the world will want to have an ambassador who has difference in opinion within what they have. Without this revenue from corporations, how is then Gareth Bale going to be retiring comfortably? He is losing millions of dollars in revenue, which is pivotal for his retirement. But panel, let's be charitable and say Gareth Bale does manage to secure new ambassador companies in the future. The likelihood of him securing equally big corporations and equally large amount like Adidas is very less. Because obviously, large corporations like Adidas, Konami will want to work with young people who has a better future and more relative to the sport of football in future. The conclusion to this argument is then very simple. As an actor, you want to safeguard your personal finances in this place. Therefore, it is important for you to be aligning with the ambassadors or the contract you signed to be for the principal. But second question then is, what is the worst case Gareth Bale may have to suffer if he choose not to wear? The first risk is very simple. If I don't wear a captain armband, maybe I would get a yellow card. In this tournament panel, even if you were to reach the final, you would only play 6 group matches, 1 quarter, 1 semi, 1 final, a total of 9 matches. Therefore, the team can still rotate each player as a captain, still normally play all the matches, and each of them would just get a yellow card. Secondly, even if Gareth Bale get a red card from the start of the match, there are two responses to this. Firstly, it is very unlikely to happen. Note, Palin, in affirmative, they tell you, you know what, people are already calling out. There's already things resistance against Qatar. Here is a tipping point where we prove to you FIFA and Qatar will eventually crumble. Playing against 10 people, playing with 10 people against 11 people in a team makes the game extremely imbalanced. This is against the principle of FIFA, which is justice, fairness, equality in the sport of football, where it damages the whole quality of the game. Fans are going to be crazy, especially people from Britain, because you're jeopardizing the country of Wales' opportunity itself to win the World Cup. Qatar will equally suffer huge repercussions because they're preventing equal playgrounds for a sport which should not be jeopardized by this. Why is this impactful for both of these people? Firstly, Qatar loses the ability to host future sports and events. For example, 2019 they hosted the Doha Athletic events. If as a person you want to have future opportunities to equally these events and you're coming up with an equal imbalanced playing spot where it is proven because of Qatar's principle a team cannot play fairly, no other country or no other sporting council in the future will want Qatar to host. Therefore, to maintain the incentive of hosting future events, Qatar is the one who will actually eventually have to succumb instead of the players to them. Second instance, even if it happens that Gareth Bale does get a red card, it is already a net loss damage for FIFA and Qatar since corporations are now going to pull out from funding and supporting. Note, FIFA generates its main source of income from viewership and sponsors to make game happen. When FIFA starts losing funding for jeopardizing the very basic principle of game, which is equality and fairness, people are going to call them out. Corporations are going to pull out because FIFA is openly forcing players. In other instances, they are forcing players to take stand before every Premier League games to support Black Lives Matters. They do make captains in Premier League to wear rainbow armbands to support LGBTQ. This sudden U-turn that FIFA is making, that is why the backlash is going to be much more good. When Gareth Bale does it, it starts the whole line of repercussion that FIFA and Qatar are about to take. Therefore, when FIFA as an organization portraying two different principles in the same spot is inviting large backlash from the corporations who want to pay for them. Number two, there's another possible event since every team has an equal principle of equality. Note panel, no team will want to claim that I won against Wales by playing them with 10 teams. That means the likelihood is if you want to sit and you want to have only 10 plays from the beginning of the game, you know what? I will be fair. I will also play with 10 plays. This gives an equal playing ground for both teams to play. That means your role as a player, even if you go out, is very unlikely to happen. I've proven to you, for example, if England is going to play Wales, there is no way England fans are going to be celebrating at the end of the day, or England coach is going to be celebrating if I won against a 10-team player. That is why, on principle, some people will just sit their player out and try to ensure equal playing ground within themselves. Never been prouder to propose.
Thank you very much for that speech. To continue the case for the negating team, I'd like to welcome up the second next speaker.
Hello, am I audible? Okay. Ah, cell phone. Cell phone. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1, go. Side affirmative is asserting a lot of information about who this captain is, like he is 34 years old, how he has partnerships with Nike, how he has a lot of these things. Note that there's never any of those things in the info slide. I think for these characterizations to matter, they have to prove structural reasons why the captain is likely to look this way. Instead of just asserting that he is 34 years old, probably they know some obscure matter that we don't study. That's not how debates work. We have to prove structural reasons why. But even if we like engage with that, right? Even if it's old, we see that the fact that you're old probably means that you've already saved up in a bank. Even if we entertain the possibility that it will affect your finances, it's probably going to be minimal because you're old and probably had a trust fund or a loan hidden some or like a savings account hidden somewhere, right? Second, Af hides behind the very convenient frame that you'll only receive a yellow card, and somehow they're fine with only receiving a yellow card. But we have to ask, what happens if you receive a yellow card? Chances are the organizers of the sporting event would require you to remove that armband, because if you do not remove that armband, you'll receive a second yellow card. If you don't remove your other armband, you will receive a red card at that, which means at that point in time when you receive a second yellow card, at that point in time when you receive a red card, that's a all of the benefits that they said about how you're going to support the LGBTQ movement falls off because you're no longer wearing the armband representing your support. The first thing that I'm going to discuss, therefore, as deputy leader of opposition, is talk about the personal stakes to the captain, because this is an actors debate. As first negative explained to you, if this motion was worded out as this house believes or is a value judgment, the argumentations coming from first and second affirmative about how we have to be unified, how we have to be inclusive, probably would fly in that debate, but it's not that kind of debate. So let's talk about personal stakes of the captain. One, they say that Wales will be disappointed at you as a captain. The first thing they're going to do is to deny this harm because they don't really explain how this harm happens. One, we say that you can criticize the decision of FIFA outside the sporting event. So this looks like posting on social media to say that this is an important thing for FIFA to do. It's like to be effective, considering that if on both sides if affirmative says that like you have some considerable influence, then you probably can co-opt the same characterization that outside the sport you also have some considerable influence. Therefore, you criticizing the FIFA outside the sporting event is like to be effective as well. If affirmative therefore says that we have to push through with supporting the LGBTQ community, we can fulfill that obligation outside. They say the Wales Association somehow required you to do this. Again, my previous observation, they had to prove structural reasons why this has actually happened. But look, chances are, even if it's true, the Wales Association probably required the captain to wear the armband, not knowing how FIFA would sanction you. So they probably made that So they probably ordered the captain to do that before FIFA announced that anyone who wears the armband will receive a booking or will be sent off the match. I think that the Wales Sporting Association cares less about a captain not being able to wear an armband, but cares more about how far you as a captain can achieve in an event using your team. This is true because it is the skills that the association, sponsors, and funders alike look at more. After all, corporations are likely to be politically neutral as well because beliefs are volatile and unreliable. If you just focus on meritocratic assessments, you're more likely to get more patronage as a corporation at that. So those chains of responses already denies how you're likely to be disavowed by Wales and the LGBTQ community because you're not doing nothing, you're doing something. It's just different from wearing an armband, right? Next, what is the psyche of fans? Because they might probably say that fans will be angry at you. We say that these fans probably followed you because of your skills initially as a team, not because of your political beliefs. But secondly, people generally think that sports should not be mixed with politics. They think that sports can escape from politics even. But even if, right, even if like some people in Wales would be disappointed at you, we say that those people don't matter because they're less proximate to you as a captain. What's more proximate to you is the opinions and the perceptions of your teammates because you've directly spent time grooming them for this particular opportunity that you will try to make them reach the utmost of their ability in the game, right? What are the impacts if you choose to wear the armband at the expense of your team's of the at the expense of the promise you made to your team? One, it means that you lose the respect of your team. They will hate you because you made you're not a good enough model for the sporting event because you received a yellow card, or be in the worst is that you get sent off because you received a red card. You will lose the respect of your team because your team will say that you've spent time grooming us for this opportunity. Now you're just going to waste it for some random political belief. At worst, your team will break up. But even if you do remain as a team, you'll probably develop poor team dynamics, so it's not going to work in the long run. So it's not going to work in the so it's not going to work in the long run. Conversely, you're relatively less obligated to the whole of Wales because you did not directly groom them for this opportunity to publicly announce. But secondly, even if you did publicly announce and that like the whole of Wales holds you to this promise, first negative order explains that this decision is invalid to be the standard of this debate. Precisely because that decision is not a perfectly informed one because you only knew of the consequences after like you made the decision. FIFA only said that they will sanction you after you made the public announcement. I like to borrow some of the famous words from one of my favorite artists, Lady Gaga, who said that there can be hundreds of people in the room and 99% don't believe in you, but one does, and that matters for the captain most probably. Even if you lose a trust of whole Wales, probably the captain would like the favor, the good perception, and the respect of his team at that. Let's now talk about the incentives of FIFA to change its organizational structure and culture because that's one of the main threats that came from side affirmative. We think that they largely, firstly, rely on the wrong parallelism. They seem to think that just because some players just because Black Lives Matter was made valid in some previous games means that this issue will be the same as well, right? They have to say that there is a same degree of tolerance for sexuality among FIFA member states. We think that the issue on Black Lives Matter is as controversial in Middle East or in Qatar because it's an issue that's largely US based, so it's less proximate to them. So they're more tolerant to it, right? But secondly, First Affirmative said it themselves that this is conducted in Qatar and the ban happened because Qatar criminalizes homosexuality. What is the implications of this concession? The fact that FIFA was held in Qatar is an implicit concession from the participating nations in the sporting event that they're okay with hosting the sporting event in a place that sees homosexuality as a sin, and the consequences thereof that can potentially happen should they go against this cultural norm is something that they implicitly conceded to, right? So like affirmative can't just argue that, well, this is done in Qatar, therefore we have to change Qatar. We think that like there is some degree of consensus, like concession to the Qatar being a venue, therefore by transitive property, to some extent the participating nations probably agree to the potential consequences of like speaking out against homosexuality in Qatar, right? But thirdly, we would suggest that there are many FIFA countries that also criminalize homosexuality, like Qatar, Brazil, Micronesia, and Saudi Arabia. Best case, you change the rules, but only for this game. Worst case, you as a captain wear the armband, accrue all of the consequences the first deck outline, and FIFA does not reverse the rule at all. But even if for some magic, you will revamp the whole FIFA structure. It's unclear why your voice is necessary. Because as first negative explained to you, the chances are the whole Qatar thing is going to be very internationally publicized. So there's a lot of media outlets covering this. A lot of people are already pitching in their voice and opinions. So losing out on one captain, one voice is probably going to not matter as much, right? What is the conclusion? The goal of changing FIFA will take a lot of organizational political impetus that cannot be reasonably derived from you wearing the armband and skipping out on the game. Conversely, if you wear the armband and get sanctioned either through a yellow card or a red card, that will have huge overwhelming costs on your team, which we explained are the most important people to you as a captain rather than the whole of Wales will probably just forget about you in a month or so. Very proud to host things.
Thank you very much for that speech. Now to continue the case for the affirming team, I'd like to welcome up the third affirming speaker.
Hi, am I visible and audible? Just to, all right. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, I think football being as big as it is has evolved into something much more than just a sport. This looks like how football is used most of the time as a medium to fight for certain rights, like for an example, the BLM movement. Gareth Bale, being an individual who actively advocates for these rights, using football as a medium to do this, is nothing wrong principally, and I would even say admirable. 3 things I'll be doing in my speech today. Firstly, few technical flaws from side negative. Secondly, a comparative of significant issues in today's debate, why side affirmative takes the debate. And thirdly, a summary of affirmative's case. Few technical flaws from side negative first. Firstly, understand that negative push towards us that this is an actor motion. So basically, it has nothing to do with Wales. So basically, a whole argument on Wales and its ideologies is a wash because it has nothing to do with Wales. It's about Gareth Bale only. But what side negative fails to understand that Gareth Bale is an individual representing Wales. This indirectly means that the principles that Wales have and their organizations in Wales have obviously would be an important consideration for Gareth Bale in terms of making this decision. So obviously, even if it's an actor motion, the principles of Wales as a whole that affects Gareth Bale would be an important consideration. Secondly, negative said there's another way to do this. Do this outside of the World Cup. 2 questions. How? When? Gareth Bale wants to wear the band in Qatar because Qatar discriminates against LGBTQ individuals. Now, side negative is telling us after you are done with Qatar, after you are done with the World Cup, Gareth Bale should probably go to FIFA and complain about Qatar's rights when it's already over all the World Cup in Qatar, which just doesn't make sense, not effective at all. They haven't proved how it's effective, and from a logical standpoint, doesn't make sense. Third thing, they also say we are inserting things about the captain. This is where I think it's very funny, right? They say that the info site itself said that it's the captain of Wales. It didn't really talk about this individual alone. Excuse me, if I'm not mistaken, there's only one captain in every team, and the captain for Wales at this instant point, since we're going to talk about the match that's going to happen in a couple of hours, is Gareth Bale. So obviously, we're going to talk about the characterization of who Gareth Bale is and the organizations and his support and the principles that he advocates for. So side negative can't just come out freely pushing this burden towards us, telling us that we can't do this kind of thing when it's already part of the motion, right? Fourthly, FIFA did not give a concession to Qatar. I think this West side opposition is mistaken, right? A big part of the second speaker's argument is basically on how FIFA has already given concession to Qatar to do this by giving them the ability to host the World Cup in the first place. Understand that the bid for the World Cup happened 12 years ago. And 12 years ago, when FIFA questioned Qatar on this whole idea, Qatar said, okay, fine, we're okay with all these LGBTQ rights, we're okay with all equal rights. But 1 week or few weeks before the World Cup is supposed to be hosted, they suddenly turned back on the decision. They said, oh no, we're not going to allow this anymore. We're not going to allow you to do armbands anymore. And obviously, FIFA, a few weeks before the competition, can't really do anything about it. So in this instance, we would just say that Qatar is a bad actor who lies. So you can't really say that FIFA gave concession towards this in the first place. Moving on towards my issues. First issue. Is it in Gareth Bale's best incentive to wear the armband? I think this is generally most of the discussion that happened on both sides, right? First of all, I think that understanding that Gareth Bale is an advocate for things like BLM previously is already part of the characterization of who Gareth Bale is generally, right? So what happens then when he does not wear the band? Few things happen, right? Firstly, we have already told you that football associations already asked him to do this. So this organizers from football associations who have a chokehold in who they want to play in certain tournaments or in the World Cup especially, already asked him or requested him to do this specifically. So if Gareth Bale chooses not to do this, he probably can play in the first round, but the second and third round he'll probably be missing because the institution as whole, the organization as whole that controls him will probably just say, since you didn't stand with our principles, we won't let you play anymore. Secondly, understand that the fans and the LGBT community would also be tremendously angry, especially because Gareth Bale has already come out with an official statement saying that he's an advocate for the LGBTQ rights. He wants to do this. He wants to wear the armband. Despite of everything, despite of all the sanctions that Qatar is going to put, despite of all these punishments, he still wants to do this. So even if they're going to come back towards us and say that, they're going to come back towards us and say that the fans and LGBT community don't really care, we would still argue to a certain extent, since that is his principle and his identity, people will still question him on his principal inconsistencies, and people would most likely don't like him because of the things that he did. Thirdly, understand that Wales itself is as a part of Great Britain as a country. So who is the biggest advocate for equal rights? Of course, Great Britain. So obviously, a country that has such a large stockhold, you representing that country or that union, obviously needs to represent this principle as well. Secondly, negative team now said probably his fans and teammates would be angry with this, right? And they say that they spend months and months of training. Hello, firstly, that's not really how long they train. Understand that these individuals like Gareth Bale and a lot of these players are involved in the Premier League, so most of the time they're not even in the country to begin with. So the training that takes place for the World Cup only happens like probably a few weeks before the World Cup itself. So in terms of contention or how long they've been spending as a team, I wouldn't really argue it's a long time. But even them, understand that two layers of analysis towards this, why we think it's still unlikely that these individuals will be angry. Firstly, understand that Wales itself is a very progressive country that understand the LGBTQ rights and often fight for the LGBTQ rights. So when you want to talk about in terms of its fans and in terms of its players, we think towards a certain extent, they really have an understanding towards these values that they should advocate. So even if initially these players might be angry, we think that towards the long run, it wouldn't really have any effect towards Gareth Bale being a country that's already progressive, right? Secondly, understand that we have different players in the team. We also have a lot of subs. We also have a lot of good players in Wales, as how my second speaker has already given examples. So if Gareth Bale, in worst case scenario, which we think is unlikely, and I'll explain that a little bit later, we can just swap captains then, right? Even then, right, we don't think it's a major problem, right? Just swap captains if he gets the red card in our worst case scenario, right? Thirdly, they say that people are already scrutinizing this issue. There's no point in doing this. They also say that this isn't going to make suddenly the policy disappear. The policy would still be there. Yeah, we get that, but it's a message, right? Just like the whole purpose he did this is a message to begin with. His whole purpose on doing this is because he advocates for these rights. It's because his country asks him to advocate for this right. So even if it doesn't work, we will still say it's a message because thousands and millions of players are going to see him wearing the armband and we think it's worth it, right? So what's the weighing here? On affirmative side, Gareth Bale won't really get shit from all these peoples at least. And the worst case is he gets a red card. Even then, we still feel it's worth it. And the scrutinize that he gets from FIFA as an organization wouldn't really be existent, right? Negative side, people just see Gareth Bale as someone who's principally inconsistent. And organizations will probably just put him in an echo chamber and don't really let him play in certain events because he don't really morally uphold towards their principles, right? Moving on towards my second issue, which is also an important but a short issue. Is it true that Gareth Bale will be punished? But I think it's important to understand that Gareth Bale is already at the retiring stage. So in our worst case, even if in our worst case, which I think is very unlikely, that Gareth Bale gets a red card and all associations boycott him, he's already hell of rich. He already had a lot of impact in the football scene. So even if he gets sacked as of right now, we don't think it's such a bad thing towards Gareth Bale as an individual, comparatively looking at his football career as of right now. But here are reasons why we think it's very unlikely for FIFA to just throw throw out Gareth Bale, right? Understand that as of right now, FIFA is just saying, and FIFA and Qatar are just saying, we're either going to give you a red card or a yellow card if you choose to wear this armband. So they didn't really expressly state what they're going to do. And a lot of people treat this as just a threat, right? So most likely what's going to happen is, in this World Cup, if Gareth Bale does wear an armband, he's most likely going to get a yellow card, and we don't think that's going to affect him as much. Why wouldn't FIFA then just take Gareth Bale out from these events and give a red card towards Gareth Bale? We think it's unlikely, because obviously people want to see this match. So putting a team of 10 people against 11 people just because you're going to give a red card towards Gareth Bale who wears armband is going to cause tremendous scrutiny towards FIFA. A lot of individuals are going to be happy. A lot of individuals are going to complain. And eventually we think that even in FIFA's interest, they're most probably not going to do that. They're probably just going to give him a yellow card and let him get away with this. So the competitivity on our side is understand that even in our worst case, since the opposition team didn't want to acknowledge anything that we say, even in our worst case, we think it's still beneficial towards Gareth Bale when it comes to spreading the message and following the principles of the country. So even in our worst case, we win over side negative. Proud to propose.
Thank you very much for that speech. To close the substantive portion of the debate, I'd like to welcome up the third negating speaker.
Hi, am I audible? Okay, thank you. Just setting up my timer. And I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I'm going to win two main issues for side negative, ones that point out the failures of affirmative in the debate. I'm going to talk about first, let's talk about what the model should look like if a captain does wear the armband or not, and what it really looks like when you talk about how it affects the team, for example, and future investments. But secondly, I'm going to talk about the way that they try to win a utopic world where they overturn much of FIFA's, non-progressive ideals, or the way that they're inconsistent, for example. So this is going to include Qatar, for example, and the future of FIFA in these games when they talk about political statements. But first, let's talk about some exchangers rebuttals. Firstly, let's talk about their idealization of the BLM movement as a precedence to why they're so good at being progressive. One, you have to realize that FIFA is made of non-white countries, meaning they're usually brown people in Qatar, Saudi Arabia. So it means that their relation to BLM is probably to support, non-racist people because they are not a white majority. So I think the example in itself false because since they already protect something they like in general, but we think that the talk about the queer community is so different because one, it's already regulation in Qatar that these are criminalized things and they don't agree on same-sex marriage. So it's a different game that they're trying to play. But even then, that you tell us that on Qatar, they talk about agreeing with unity with FIFA, we think that the fact that the state already tells you that they don't agree with this, it's criminal to be gay in Qatar, means that they're probably still going to listen to the government first, not FIFA usually, but only got to the bed of being a host because of the return on investment, because you got to build infra but get the returns of people buying tickets, for example, and media coverage. But secondly, there's a tension in their case that you have to think as vital. They told you in your first affirmative that when you cut out, you're not consistent with your support to the community, you're gonna be cut off from the team. You're not gonna get any more profit because you're old. You're gonna retire in specific context that wasn't even agreed on the debate. But in third act, you heard them say that even if they get cut off from the team, they're gonna be fine because they're rich. So that is the question. So what is the captain? Are they rich? Do they have more to lose or not to lose at all? Because if they had none to lose, it means that the benefits of them standing up doesn't really make sense because they're gonna do it anyway. What's the debate about? So we think that you have to debate on the question whether the captain weighing the benefits and the negative effects of the decision is going to happen on the captain and the team. So it means that you can't just debate that nothing bad is going to happen. Otherwise, it's useless to debate even. So we're going to talk about the first issue where you talk about the implications on the captain. The first question that we ask in the debate is, does the captain wear the armband alone or as a team? Why is this vital? Because we already told you the role of a captain is like to be emulated by your teammates, meaning that as a team, the unity is so important. So when they decide to wear an armband, it's likely that everyone in the team will follow suit. Because if that's not true, they don't accrue the whole benefit of being, sending a message because it's just one person in the team. So it means that it shows the message as well that the team is not supporting the decision, which is also bad reputation. So it means that when you talk about being alone by wearing the armband, when you remove, they had to talk about where. Next question now is, where is the captain most likely to be, put off a team? Is it when they do not play at all because of a decision to wear the armband? Or is it the decision to not wear the armband and all the inconsistency in principles? We think that's likely since the investment made on you is purely because of your physical skill as a soccer player, and they get the returns on investment when you win the round, because when you get the championship, you have prizes in cash. That's where your sponsors know that you're a great investment. But if they do not even see the extent of your talent simply because you got off the bench, you got on the bench because you wore the armband, they're not gonna see your potential. They're gonna see you being stubborn and not following the investment, that they're trying to make logically, because you threw it away because of one political messaging. We think that in terms of, if it's true that your captain is also, kind and consistent in Wales and Britain, it also means that if you told us they have charities and associations, I'd posit when people see that for 10 years you've been running donations to the homeless gay people, and this is the only time you don't wear the armband, they're not likely to tell you that you're a bigot. They're likely to understand that FIFA is so unfair. That's why they got pushed to the corner. They had no choice. But even then, when they realize that you've made off millions giving away to gay people, they're likely to still respect you. You can explain yourself outside the game. They never told you why explaining to the public after the game is not as powerful, for example. And when you can literally get mad at FIFA while you're in the stadium, you can talk to a media reporter and tell them, I did not wear the armband, but it was not at my will. I am angry. They can do those kinds of things. It's going to be as popular because you're going to hear an angry captain that tells you the beliefs that they have are being, suppressed by Qatar, suppressed by FIFA. These are great messagings as well. So we think that, and secondly, let's talk about the next thing under this issue is the corporation funding, for example, or fans. They talk about how fundings can be pulled out under your rug simply because you know, Nike is progressive, everyone is progressive in the funding. Firstly, you have to talk about how far companies are willing to go in terms of upholding beliefs. We think that the reason you're being sponsored in the first place because of your skill. You're a great soccer player. You need to wear the greatest shoes to be able to grade the sport, not because you're the best advocate for the community. So it means in terms of priorities, it does have to be your career. We affirmative already engaged this that it's their first priority, not necessarily, the goodness in their hearts. So it means to some extent you have to assume that these are important. Even in terms of fans, they never disprove the fact that fans are here because of your greatness in soccer, not necessarily you an LGBT advocate. If that was the case, they're probably not going to be popular in soccer. They're going to be popular in the movement. So if it's true that they are a good soccer player, the fans are likely to prioritize your skill regardless. So even if they disappoint you to some extent, you're probably still going to listen to context. Context is important because as a liberal, aside negative sounds, you're not necessarily doing the wrong thing. We improve to you because the last issue I'm gonna have under this is you talk about you're gonna swap a captain in the worst case, right? Why is this already bad on their side? They never proved to you why swapping a captain doesn't change team dynamics. I posit that it does. This is the most trusted person in the team who creates strategies that you have to follow. It's their signals you have to look at. It's their movement you have to follow. We think that when you change them in the middle of a game or regardless, it already harms the team dynamics as well. It's not what you practice, not what you plan. So that in itself is harmful within the game. But secondly, on their bigger goal of overturning FIFA and all of their good causes, they told us as a burden push that what our alternatives have to prove that they are equally working in their world, that they don't wear the armband. We told you three things that exist as alternatives and are things that are already popular in stats. So talk about one, international community call out. So we agree that the Qatari people are those that are hurt. For example, when you talk about queer communities in Qatar and people in the international community have already gained so much media attention in publication, in media, in news, like so many avenues. Like right now, it's literally headlines. But secondly, we talked about people outside the country. Probably gonna talk about it anyway. You're gonna criticize it, but what you're gonna get at best if you wear the armband is they're gonna use you as proof that you are supporting. But I posit that you get the same clamor when you talk about it to the media yourself, when you explain yourself as a captain that you're mad. So it means on our side, we target the same institutions and not necessarily, burden the captains for being the moral compass of FIFA. That's not really the case. But secondly, they tell you that the only harm you're gonna get is in this game, the next game, or the next FIFA World Cup you're gonna be able to join. We think that one, the moment they rectify their stance on gay rights, for example, as FIFA or Qatar, it's gonna take you years for them to overturn, tell you that what you did was actually good because they can't risk angering their host nations, for example. But secondly, they probably they're gonna tighten regulations in the next games, meaning instead of just saying that this game we're not allowed to wear the armband, the next future games of FIFA probably gonna look like no political messaging at all. The moment your sponsor tries to put a rainbow, the moment you try to speak about politics in a country, in your host country, we're not gonna play. These are the precedents you set when you anger host nations that FIFA has already conceded to respect regulation. That's why reporters wear hijabs. People don't mingle with different sexes. These are important concessions they never talked about because the nuances of being a host nation also affects your decision as a captain. But since this is an after motion, we tied everything to what is at stake to themselves, to their team, and what happens to the longevity of their careers the moment they wear the armband. This is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just being pushed to a corner and having to do what is best with the time given. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that speech. Now, as is customary, we reverse the speaking order and half speaking times. I'd like to welcome back the reply speaker for the negating team.
Just a sec. I'm setting up the earphones. Hello, am I audible and visible? Okay. Bukas pa yung ano? Do? Bukas ba? Hindi ako kita. Anyway, okay. Hi, I'm back. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The first thing that I'd like to do as opposition reply is ask the question: who is Gareth Bale? I'm a queer person of color living in the Philippines, so I don't know a lot about specific sports personalities like Af is very proud of, but I do have a modicum of knowledge about debate, and one of those is everything on the info slide is assumed to be true. Anything that teams have to add should be proven through structural reasons. So it's unclear to me why this captain, from the lens of a neutral observer, is specifically 34 years old, specifically has tons of partnerships with other sponsors and corporations. But even if this captain really is retiring, is old, has tons of partnerships, the reason why negative still wins is that our arguments still apply to the um, characterizations that side affirmative just asserted in this debate. What did we say coming from negative? We say that chances are you value the respect from your team first, as opposed to the uh, satisfaction that the rest of us will probably gain if you wear the armband. We say that an old person can still value this, and even argue even more so that since that an old person would want to value the respect of their teammates because old people are relatively more sentimental. Note that as early as second negative, we already weighed the issue of if we're going to talk about which people are you more willing to disappoint? Is it the rest of Wales or is it the rest of your teammates? We said that it's your teammates probably because they're more proximate to you. You've directly groomed them for this opportunity. Those things are lacking from the rest of Wales. Second, we said your sponsors likely rely on your achievements as well because empirically speaking, that's what corporations initially look for in a athlete. What are their meritocratic achievements? What are their skills? It's unclear, therefore, why your existing sponsors will pull out inside negative, especially more so given that we don't just become bystander on the LGBT cause. I think side affirmative is largely ignorant of the fact that just because you don't wear an armband means it's equal to doing nothing. We said from side negative that just because you don't wear an armband doesn't mean that you won't do anything at all. We said that you can probably still do things like criticizing FIFA after the game, giving in-depth interviews to reporters during FIFA saying that you don't agree with this policy but you had to do so because you were forced. It's a different form of resistance, but it's resistance nonetheless. A resistance that side affirmative wasn't able to explain as invalid or ineffective, right? But thirdly, we said that on a more principled level, we think that your decision to your public announcement should not be the standard of this debate because that public announcement is not a fully informed choice to begin with because you didn't know how FIFA would react the moment you made that public announcement. You only knew the consequences of wearing the armband after you announced that you would wear one. So in terms of whether or not this decision is valid or not, it's should not be the standard by which you adjudicate this debate because that's not a fully informed choice to begin with. There's a tension in the case of affirmative, which is to suggest that from third affirmative, they say that the captain is probably rich, so you don't have to worry about sponsorships. But in second negative, they argue that it's important for the captain to be in the good graces of the Wales Sporting Association to ensure steady income of money. If we agree with government whip, then that's one less reason for the captain to wear the armband on their side. But if we agree with DPM, notice that we use the same analysis that they had from whip in the second negative speech, that you've probably had enough money stowed away already because you're old. So it doesn't really matter if you, in their hypothetical harm, you lose some of these sponsors at the end of the day. The last thing that they would like to observe is side affirmative hides under this very convenient frame that you'll probably only get a yellow card. But if we agree that in one match that you're going to wear the armband for all matches in a game, right? Means that if you wear the armband in this one match and you're given a yellow card, and if you wear the armband in the second match, you're going to receive two yellow cards and continue that trend until you're given a red card. I think they're just trying to brush away the possibility you're going to be kicked out of the game with less points for them in terms of worst case engagement.
Thank you very much for that speech. And to close the debate, I'd like to welcome back up the leader of the affirming team.
Hi, I'm just making sure I'm visible and audible. Right, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, the burden of affirmative is simple. The captain would wear the armband just for the match a few hours from now, not for a couple of matches. As long as we can prove to you the harms that the benefit you're talking about is attainable by you only wearing for that one match, we still win the debate. We don't need to defend a world where this captain is going to wear for a couple of matches. Panel, I realize negative doesn't understand football when they ran an argument and said the captain wears armband, every other 10 players will wear the armband and follow suit. There's only one captain in the football, only one person wearing the armband, not the whole team wearing the armband. First question, they claim there's no information. The info slide is a general voters information. Panel, the motion info slide clearly says the game kicks off few hours from now. Therefore, obviously, they're referring to the current Wales captain, who is Gareth Bale. It's all in newspapers because it's a controversial issue. Team Limeside make public, so general voters still has access to this. That is the status quo. Even at worst, it is someone else. The harms we talk about still manifest on individual, because being a national player, standing out for millions of people, is still something big. Especially captain of a national player, you are still a big team leading a country, millions of people. You're bound to get equal contracts and benefits you're talking about. Second question, what is the end goal when you wear an armband? A, you get a yellow card. You can still continue to play, but note panel, how you get all the exclusive benefit of resisting openly FIFA we talked about is attainable. You garner support, be consistent in principle as a your ambassador deals which rake you billions as a per jam. Secondly, note negative is only interested in the worst possible scenario. Not once did they defend, okay, you get yellow card, why is it still bad? They're totally okay with the player getting yellow card, walking away, because they also consider the fact that we want the captains to equally support for LGBTQ. When you get a red card, they claim that, you know what, you jeopardize your whole team. The whole team breakups. People hate each other. Panel, getting red card is always a part of the game. If you commit a serious fault or you commit repeated minor offense like delay, you can still get red card and sent off. For example, in the game for France and Brazil, Zinedine Zidane headbutt his opponent for studying about his sister, got a red card and sent off, but the team still continued to play. In the next tournament of Euro, Zidane still came and played. There's no problem of team breaking up whatsoever. But what is the comparison we told you, Pennant? If you choose not to wear the armband at all, instead of going against FIFA, you are going against your own country's football association, who elected you to represent Wales, who made you captain to play for Wales. Now they're going to remove you because they tell you to wear the armband in your don't wear. It is even worse for the captain now, because you cannot even represent yourself at country World Cup because you're not allowed by the association, who wants you to read values. All the harms negative is talking about is amplified when your own football association doesn't even allow you to play for your country in the first place. Note that also fans cannot watch football because the decision made by the football association to elect is the one to elect Gareth Bale and not anyone else. Third question, do captains know what will happen when they wear the armband to the pitch? They say the captains do not know. Panel, captains attend press conference before the tournament, before the match. Journalists ask questions, are you okay with it? People say yes. Captains are not some children who don't know what is currently happening. Captains are clearly made aware of this information by their own National Football Association. Captains are made aware of this statement by official FIFA statements. Captains do know they'll be sanctioned, they still choose to stand. It is a full conscious decision of them to wear. 4. Did countries and FIFA actually consent to criminalizing players LGBTQ. 12 years ago, panel, when Qatar won the bid to host, they said they're okay with beer, we're okay with queer, we will respect and accept them. That is why countries agreed. 12 years later, 1 week before the tournament, all of a sudden Qatar says, you know what, we will sanction you if you wear the armband. Obviously, even Gareth Bale as a normal person didn't consent to this, because 12 years ago when Qatar wanted to bid, they said we're okay with this. Qatar made a U-turn. It's an extremely harmful thing. Fifth issue then, people can issue statement and say I can force to remove the armband. Panel, media won't care because everyone else is doing it. But when a player gets sent off, it pisses off 5 billion people in the world. That is when true changes happen. People take the necessary intensive to protect their own reputation. Last issue then, which world corporation will support ambassador? Obviously, panel, for you to earn the ambassadorship, you need to play good soccer. But for you to maintain that ambassadorship, you must not be breaching contracts you sign by going against the principles of the ambassador. People can very easily terminate your contract for breaching this contract when you're going against the breach. For all these reasons, we have never been proud to propose.
Awesome. So thanks everyone for what was a great, really fun, exciting sports round. I'll give one bit of general feedback and then give the result and how the panel came to the decision. In terms of some general feedback, I think at times both teams in this debate tended to make slightly assertive statements about what the world looks like and how people will react without necessarily always taking the steps in between to explain why things will necessarily follow in the logical order that they suggest they do. So simple feedback here is to always, at every claim you make, ask yourself why that claim is true, why it's likely to happen in that way, even if it is a statement that you believe to be true, just to make sure that you're covering all of those logical grounds. In terms of the result, so the panel was unanimous. We awarded this debate to the negating team, so congratulations and commiserations. A few issues in this debate, as a broad framing issue, what the captain cares about, and then largely everything in this debate then falls down to the consequences if you don't wear the armband, both personally and in terms of team success, and then the consequences if you do wear the armband. In terms of what the captain cares about, there's a few things here. The affirming team says that because you are representing your country, you're also representing your country's values. The negating team says that your primary care are to the success of your team and what your teammates want from you. I think the affirming team is correct to note that the captain certainly cares about what the Welsh Football Association wants him to do, but the negating team also gives various metrics to suggest that playing well for the team is a primary priority, being that the Football Association selects you on the basis of your skill and probably wants you to do well and get success, but also that you are proximate most to the people directly in your team. So even if broader society gives you some level of hate for the decision you make, it matters what your proximate team also thinks about you as well. I think at the end of all of the framing analysis we get from both teams, both of these conceptions are true, obviously just contingent on what actually happens and how people respond. So I think the debate largely just comes down to the way that people will react in both worlds. So what are the consequences in a world where you don't choose to wear the armband? The affirming team here says that sponsorships and relationships with larger football associations are at risk in a world where you don't wear the One Love armband. The negating team at first attempts to respond to this by saying that some of the information that the affirming team gives us is out of the info side. I think the average globally informed voter probably can reasonably assume that the captain of a national team is successful enough to have a significant amount of brand deals, might even know enough about the specific player's success to know about their championship league wins and how close they might be to retirement. All of those things probably can be something that globally informed voters are aware of. I think the problem for the affirming team under this material, however, is that even if the globally informed voter knows all of these facts, I don't think it's ever substantiated as a fact that all of these things are then at risk if the actor does not wear the armband. And I think that's where the negating team actually brings in a lot of their successful rebuttals and attack the affirming team to minimize those negative consequences that might arise if the captain chooses not to wear that armband. The harms that the affirming team rely on is that your country might drop you from the national team if you don't represent Welsh and British really inclusive values, and that sponsors will also be angry if you're not representing the broadly inclusive values that those corporations hold. In response, the negating team says that even if you choose not to wear the armband, you can still make statements to the media that you were forced not to wear it because FIFA imposed consequences after you had initially announced that you would wear it, and that people will be understanding if they believe that you have been an advocate in the past because they know that FIFA is the one is at fault for being a little bit evil, and you probably wanted to do the right thing but are choosing to prioritize your support. They tell us that because people are generally aware of the track record of Qatar's human rights and also the lack of support from FIFA on this issue, which is like different to Black Lives Matter, it's more likely that they're willing to forgive you in this instance. The way that the affirming team chooses to respond to this material is to say that fronting up to the media after the fact of the World Cup is probably insufficient because people specifically want to hold FIFA to account with the mistakes they have made in the Qatar World Cup, not in general. I think the problem is that response in isolation doesn't engage with the fact that people have dual priorities in this debate as fans, which is that they care about their captain making a statement, but also probably really want their team to be successful, select players on the basis they might be successful, and would also be willing to hear their player out. I think the consequence of all of that analysis is the negating team probably is correct to say you can get a lot of the social backlash towards FIFA, even if you don't choose to wear the armband, simply by speaking up about the way the decision was made, and that it is reasonable to assume that people will want to publicize it if it's enough of a hot button issue when it first arose. The impact of this clash then is that I don't believe that the negative consequences the affirming team runs in this debate will necessarily arise if you choose not to wear it, because the negating team is able to show that people to a large extent will understand why you made the decision and redirect their anger towards FIFA for imposing those consequences in the first place, rather than the captain for following those directives and trying to avoid those consequences in order to play well for the team. Then in terms of what the consequences would be in a world where you did choose to wear the armband, the affirming team tells us here that wearing the armband helps you do things like preserve your sponsorships and also send a strong message. I think first thing I will note is just on that sponsorship, the same analysis as I've covered above applies here, where I don't think that link is necessarily clear between why sponsors will need you to take this action in order to know that you were a good person or to not punish you. I think the more interesting stuff is when they tell us that the scale of punishment you get from FIFA for wearing the armband is likely to be nominal because FIFA has incentives to make sure the game still looks fair, but that the punishment is enough to send like a strong message, make people on the ground protest what FIFA is doing, and try to hold them to account for, giving the bid to a country that doesn't have a good human rights record, things like that. In response, the negating team says that two things might happen. The first is to say that the consequence for the sport could be large in that it might determine the results of a game in a world where that yellow card ends up being consequential. But the second is to say that team trust and kind of like the trust that a football association has in you goes down in a world where you make this decision that it potentially impacts your gameplay, whether it does or not, because the team feels like you made that decision behind their back, and also that a football association that put you into a position of captaincy in order to get the team success might be unhappy in a world where you're going against their directive. I think here there's a little bit of like an assertion battle between both teams, where the affirming team attempts to say that the football association wants you to wear this armband, and the negating team claims that all they want is success from you. I think in the context of this debate, not enough analysis is given from both teams to resolve which is factually true. I think the average reasonable voter can assume, however, that the analysis the negating team runs with regards to the fact that FIFA makes consequences known after the initial announcement is made from the team means that it's likely that the Football Association will want you to prioritize team success, given that you are selected to play for the team and can still have other options available to make your political views known. On that basis, I think the negating team is able to show quite significantly that there are high potential consequences, even in the world where I think the affirming team is able to show that those consequences might not be as bad as being benched from the game completely, because FIFA still wants the play to seem fair by not taking a player off the field at all. The negating team's analysis around why the team is likely to feel betrayed by the decision you make still stands and gets insufficient response, meaning that there is a tangible harm that arises if the captain makes this decision, and that's why the negating team is able to take this debate.